If you are a senior or executive job seeker and you didn't get the job offer, then let's find out why. Let's go straight to the C-suite hiring manager and ask them, what is it that they're really looking for when they're hiring a senior person just like you? Can't wait to find out what they've got to say. Welcome back to the Executive Edge Show. I'm Johnny Walker and I help executive job seekers get their ideal job faster. And today I'm joined by Rob Clifford. Welcome, Rob.
Afternoon, Johnny. Afternoon, everybody.
Rob has worked in some relatively scary places on the planet as a former UK Armed Forces officer and has held some pretty hefty technology positions, including head of engineering for 21 Signals and CTO of Joint Forces Information Services and Communication in Afghanistan. And he's going to help us understand what it takes to get hired by someone at Rob's level. Rob, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit more so our listeners can get just a flavour for what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I basically help chief executive and operating officers at SMEs reduce costs probably by about circa £750,000 by leading the sort of delivery, design and implementation of the technology contribution to digital transformation and operational transformation programs.
Okay, so you're all about the nuts and bolts of the business. Digital transformation, very popular nowadays. The world has gone digital crazy since lockdown was introduced about 18 months ago. And operational transformation, particularly SMEs. I see this a lot. That sort of, you know, when you break through the sort of £1 billion and go on towards 10 million quid, £1 million and go on to 10 million quid, and there's that sort of hinterland there where, you know, you invest a lot, but often you forget to then go back and trim the fat off. And there's a lot of operational efficiencies to be gained. I think it's the polite language for it. Is that the kind of area you're talking about?
That's it exactly. So personally, I've got a depth and breadth of technology knowledge, but it's technology that's the easy bit of any transformation, especially if it's in the operations digital space. It's actually looking at the people, the process, and more importantly now, the data and the interfaces. That's key. And that's what drives the sort of savings that you can make both in operational running and the cost of IT. So we're not just buying pets, we've actually got livestock that's working for us.
It managed my ears when I was in large change programs. The amount of CIOs I met who just used to buy lots and loads of shiny shit to put in the basement. They just loved extra spends, more spends, more people, more empire. I'm bigger, therefore more money for me. And just like, mate, you're just so inefficient. So I'm loving to hear the alternative view there. So who works for you then? What kind of hires are we talking about when you're in the big chair?
So technology advanced so much and there's a raft of different job titles, but I suppose it's best to concentrate on those in the digital space where the heavy recruitment is at the minute. So that's developers of all sorts, product owners, because it's about productizing and monetizing data and applications now. Data teams assist that. That's everything from data scientists and analysts through to people who can visualize it into dashboards and help people understand their data better, and technical architects and solution architects who can help create that ecosystem that delivers true value.
And this is what I see quite a lot, particularly in the data space, is that, you know, I don't know, up to 10 years ago and in the last decade, everyone's, you know, talked about big data. Everyone's very keen on, you know, collecting as much of it as possible. Great. What are you going to do with it? And there's not a lot of understanding about what that data means and interpreting it, particularly data visualization. Takes some skill. It's not just doing pretty pictures. It's like, what does that data actually tell us? And sometimes you can get a false positive, can't you, with data if you don't know what you're doing and take your business off in the wrong direction. So how do you tell? What's the difference between a great, I don't know, say data scientist or a great technical architect and a regular one? They can both do the job, but one of them's going to blow you away.
So for me, it's all about the alignment to the operational and business need. So most people can walk the walk when it comes to understanding data, talking about it. And if they don't fully, then that can be a learned skill. You know, you don't have to have a 100% graduate of data science to turn them into a data scientist and have them applying their skills. It's more about, can they put it into impact and result? Can they talk about, you know, when I did this happened and the output for the business was. And one of the big things I like in my team is when something goes wrong, they talk about the outcome on the business was this. And likewise, if we make a change, we talk about, and the impact on the business for the positive, hopefully, is this. And it's that alignment to operational and business need, the sort of, the drive to see IT as a differentiator, not just a cost center.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we're talking a way back now, but I mean, historically, IT was seen as a cost center. It was a servant of the business. It did stuff, mainly processy type things. A bit of manual labor reduction, great. But I think nowadays, more and more businesses could be led by IT if the IT function thought more commercially. I'm not certain I see that in every single one, but for you, that's the key differentiator, is if you're interviewing someone and they can talk about the commercial impact, positive or negative, about mistakes and benefits, then you think they've understood what IT is really for.
Yeah, and I think you said technology could lead the business there. I think it is a wholehearted partnership, and it is moving on from that. Previously, always seen as a servant, it's just IT do this, or IT would run its own little projects doing it to the business.
Yeah.
Instigating change because, as you say, it was something shiny to do. But now it's more about what's your requirements and a good, open, frank discussion, and actually not just to be anal about those requirements, but to try and say, what do you really mean by that? How can we shape that better? And for us to technology, that is, to drive into, and here's a good idea we've got. This could possibly help you. How does this fit in? And that alignment is what we're seeing more and more. There shouldn't be a chasm between IT, technology, and the business. And everywhere I've worked, I've driven to make it a true partner rather than as I say, a cost center or described in the terms of IT, tech, or them.
Yeah, I get that. And I'd imagine there's quite a contrast to draw between that articulation of requirements and understanding requirements when you're in the armed forces versus in civilian life. Armed forces tend to sort of de-risk their communication more, I would imagine.
I guess that's really interesting. So in the armed forces, you move every 1 or 2 years, depending on where you are in the tempo, be that operations, promotion, or just naturally coming to the end of your 2-year tour. I was in a corps which thrives on moving everybody, not rapidly, but every 2 to 3 years, so that you build your own skill set and you bring a fresh set of eyes into a different regiment, a different unit, a different organisation delivering services to the MOD, etc.
Right. We'll talk about legacies in a minute. So let's get back to the interview then. So we're looking at a commercial mindset, someone who can articulate the impact, benefits, consequences to the business rather than just within the IT space. So how do you find out who's great and who's not at interview time? I'm going to sit in front of you and there's going to be some questions coming my way. What are you looking for?
So before you see any CVs, they've generally been through the talent team and some of my peers and my direct reports, and look at skills. As I said, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're not 100% on the skills. Then when you start talking in the interview, it's after the IT credibility test.
Yeah.
It's going back to that. In your CV, you said you did a release every month, but what was that release and what did it do, and the why and the how much was the benefit, and trying to extract that. Some people naturally get that. They'll have done competency-based interviewing and it'll roll off their tongue. Other people, you have to draw it out of them. And so what we're looking for is that, can you describe what benefit you actually had, or are you just, I hate to use the expression, a real geek? There's a place for geeks in my team, and we've got tons of them. But it's seeing if people can actually develop and understand what the business is. Now, also with my talent team, I'm very specific about, at the minute I work in the financial sector, I never say must have experience in the financial sector, because we want fresh thinking, we want new ideas, and I've moved sector quite regularly, so I don't mind if someone else wants to move sector quite regularly. That'd be very two-faced of me to say must have experience in this sector. So that's what's key. And then generally we run through problem scenarios. So I'll discuss about, have you ever seen conflict in the business? Or I'll use a live example from our business where we have got some conflict or we have had previously, and then discuss how it was resolved. And you're looking for a sort of someone that can work and partner, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
Then there's a massive piece about there's always problems in IT and delivering technology, be that the people element, the process, or just sheer time in delivery. And so you generally talk about a problem, and you want to see someone that can break it down into delivery in, I hate to use the term agile, but in steps, and in understanding what a minimal viable product is, what that does for the business, what the key features are, not just what you want to deliver, but what the business really needs. And then the final thing is, I always ask about, have you ever had a failure? And it doesn't matter if they haven't. Some people haven't, but it's actually to see how they overcame that. And there's a classic about did that turn into an opportunity, and then how did you handle it really? Because failures are always going to happen, and you have to learn from them and adapt and move on. And
what I heard earlier there was it's less about the how, because if there's a how gap, a skill gap, a knowledge gap, that's teachable, it's learnable. But it's more about the why and the how much. And again, that's that commercial perspective you talked about earlier. Okay, and then I think thereafter, and no surprises for someone who's a leader from the Signal Corps, it's about communication. So how do you deal with failure experience and communication? How do you lead or resolve conflicts and overcome problems? So we're at interview. We're getting through this now. And what are the traps and tips for avoiding, what are the tips for avoiding the traps at interview, particularly if you're interviewing someone senior? Because as the CTO or CISO, you're going to have various heads of working for you. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so if it's a senior hire, I always sort of say, people have got methodologies in their head. They'll have done agile. If it's a project manager, they'll have done prints or management of portfolios or management of programs, one of those sort of things. Yeah. And actually, when we start doing questions that are about solving problems, about conflict resolution, about delivery, it's actually the people who are doctrinal and start reciting a manual instead of applying it intelligently, that you start to, I hate to say, shut down. You have to sort of tease out of them, hang on, that might not have been correct for that solution, or we don't do that in this firm, or we cannot do it. There's no point having that risk register at that level because we don't have that level of operational risk or understanding in the business yet. Bring it in later, but you just can't come in and be doctrinal in this firm when you can't be doctrinal in this sort of environment at the minute.
Yeah, as all plans don't survive initial contact with the enemy. It's you have to learn, but then you've got to adapt, isn't it?
There's always the no plan survives first contact, so you have to be thinking all the time about what's your next step. But don't set off on a pessimistic route. Plan well and then have diversions along it if you need to.
Yeah, but be able to apply it on the fly rather than have to keep referring back to the manual.
That's it, exactly. And I think IT candidates can always be a bit 50-50. I am myself. I know that in a psychometric test, I'll come out as a strong blue person, a heavy engineer, but I know that, and so tailor my style accordingly. And so what you're looking for is someone that is a true leader and manager who isn't, oh, this is the way I did it previously, therefore I'm going to do it this way here. You want someone that's willing to accept challenge and also willing to develop their team. Big believer in the sort of T-shaped person who isn't just in a swim lane, but is willing to look left and right. And that's how high-performing teams that I work with, collaborate and deliver.
Okay, nice. And any other things that we ought to be mentioning here right now? I'm talking that, you've had some pretty interesting job titles in your time, but I think in my experience, and maybe this is, because I worked in change management, I think a lot of people can be, I'm going to say it, a little bit up their own arse when it comes to job titles. Whereas it sounds like you're more interested in the outputs rather than the inputs. So walk me through some of the things that you can share with us there.
Yeah, so I started in IT a long time ago. I won't say how long ago, but I don't think the internet was invented. The whole point of that is technology has moved rapidly on, and it changes all the time.
Yeah,
and you've got to, and I run a fairly flat structure with my team. There's a hierarchy that's delivered in the HR system, and naturally I have accountability and take the blame where necessary. And what that drives is that collaboration and that learning. And what we need is well, I need in my teams is people who are egoless. There's absolutely no point in you being willing to score extra points off your counterpart in infrastructure if you're in security, because you know they're making a mistake, and you can highlight, we could have had a breach there, but I stopped it. Stop it before it becomes a problem. There's no need for that competition where it's all teamwork. And so I search for people who are egoless, and there are a lot of people who will come in, as you said earlier, at all levels, and want to change the IT estate to look like it did in their previous business unit, because that's what they're content with, rather than learn something new or adapt. And it starts to blur anyway, technology. There's not a lot of difference between, Confluent and Azure DevOps, to use two examples of management of software. But a lot of people will come in and be, well, I don't know how to use that system, therefore I want to divert my team onto this new one, spend money instead of sweating that.
Okay, so where do you succeed most? Give me an example of the kind of environment where you think, that's where I thrive.
So, as I said, being in the military, you move every 1, 2, 3 years. It's quite high tempo organization. Everyone around you is moving, so I get through the change curve pretty quick because you have to. Yeah. That doesn't mean I'm change ambivalent and don't see that other people have difficulties in that area, but it means that I can drop into something, pick up a strategy that's probably already written by somebody else, work on that, take the best bits of it, move them forward, not reinvent the wheel, but examine what they've done instead of having analysis paralysis, move it forward, make the changes where it's needed. So it's those sort of 1 to 2 year transformation environments where I love to work, where you can make a real difference. So you can come into a green or brownfield site and pick something up. I hate to use the word polish, but polish it a little bit if need be. Move it on, help it into the business, and then I have no, like I say, I'm egoless on that, and then I have no qualms with handing it over to somebody else, and them looking at it and saying, well, this was a good start, Rob, but we need to do this now. And I'm like, that's great, that's what we need to do. I can help you start that off as I retire backwards and look for my next transformation role. Yeah.
And that pragmatic view on work that somebody else has done, the legacy pieces, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong on here, but that would filter into lowering the cost of transformation, because you're not reinventing the wheel. You're saying, well, there's stuff here we can reuse, we can repurpose that, we can leverage that. We won't necessarily take it wholesale, but we're not going to bid it wholesale either.
That's exactly it. It comes from that. So I parachute in a previous business unit. I may well have used, a certain workflow and orchestration tool. The strategy at the minute is using another one. There's a number of, products already built in that. What's the point in me saying, well, let's change it to this one because it's a far better market leader. It's higher in the top right of Gartner. Let's sweat that asset. Let's make it work for now. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. Let's keep the operational costs going and examine it at contract renewal. Don't just change it for the sake of change or vanity. So that drives down that cost. And good. I think there's an amazing piece in the world of digitization about hyper automation, which is the collection of workflow orchestration, RPA, AI. Yeah. I've chatted with peers who go on about we've got 800 bots on our estate, but those robots are actually doing processes that should have been killed. So you're wasting time and money on roboticizing something that would have been a simple change in a workflow or in a business process, such as removing a check by a certain manager. So it's looking for those small savings rather than diving straight in with AI is the answer. Let's take it right back to lean principles.
Now, this is the question I've been dying to ask the entire interview. So what's it really like comparing military life and civilian life? Because you've led in both.
I guess the people who are in the military are exactly the same. They're just people. There's a little tiny bit that you have there's a mantra that often pops out, which is task, team, individual, where you concentrate on what the task is. Then it's as a leader, it's how's your team performing. Then it's yourself. I think in civilian life, the task and team are a little bit more blurred and together because you have to have that. Yeah. But I guess built into me as a sort of selfless leadership where it's about developing my team. And I always think I've got success when towards the end of any role I've got, I'm starting to make myself redundant because my team have become not mini me's, but have actually become, high performing and self-developed and can highlight problems before I do. And it's when I can say, there's no point me going to, sit down with the CEO and explain this and take the glory for it. I want you to go now and chat with him here and explain what you've done, why you've done it. And you deserve that kudos. And that's where I sort of come from.
How do you prepare them for that, though? I mean, it's all really well them learning how to do their job, but there's a whole other thing, leveling up and being able to present that back to senior people instead of you, for example.
So I work really hard on succession planning, and that's based on a military career where you have to do that, and development of people you lead is effectively part of that. So I work hard on succession planning. And then I just have a very simple thing that I call 2 up, 2 down, which is where whenever I brief, and that's once a week at the minute, I have my direct reports and their direct reports, and it's open forum, open challenge. And I explain to them what my boss is thinking, and if necessary, what his boss is thinking, and explain where the business is going, what the strategy is. Don't hide it. There's no point saying, well, you're not capable of understanding this. And if anyone's got a question, no matter how stupid, we explain it in a different way or in a different analogy, and that starts to develop people. And then, I don't want to use the word in a hideous way, but it's about empowering. But the key thing about empowerment is you can empower someone to failure. So what you have to do is you have to give them a task and then very carefully monitor them to start off with, and just help them along. And it's that coaching and mentoring that helps to bring them up and get them thinking at the next level up, so they're ready for promotion or to leave. And I never have any qualms about my team leaving the business, especially if it's for a far better job where they're going to excel. And I always wish them good luck, and happy to have them back because they've worked with me for a while. And I have no, like I say, ego. I hate to use that word again. And I think one of the best things we did in this current role is bring in training. So we went for a skills provider, all online. And during the COVID pandemic, we said, we want you to change your work routines to fit in with your home life, your social life. Don't go queue for 2 hours doing shopping in the middle of the day. At the end of the day. Do it in the middle of the day. All we want to see is your results coming out of the team. Flex yourself. But with that training, what we want you to do is find an hour to an hour and a half each week. I did say an hour mandated, but put it in your diary, block it out, and do some training. Find some space for yourself. Do whatever training you want to do. There's no directed training in it. It's got everything from leadership skills, project management, through to them diversifying and possibly even looking for a new role in our business or somewhere else. But that's the trust that you have to build with people is my key thing.
I imagine you're like catnip to civilian employers, because the number one bugbear they have is that senior people who parachute in and affect change and it's positive and they leave the business in a better shape but what they don't affect is knowledge transfer. The people that were there working with them are actually smarter. They've gained some experience, but they're not actually that much smarter than they were beforehand. And that's because paid consultants like to retain that knowledge themselves so they can then charge it again. Whereas you're trying to level everybody up and genuinely make yourself redundant so you can go on and do another program, perhaps at a high level, possibly even for the same organization. Very, very few management consultants make a point of doing knowledge transfer. They all say they do, but not many do. So I imagine your paymasters will love you for that. So any final advice or comments you want to leave us with? Because this has been fascinating.
No, like I said, I think for me as an IT leader, it isn't about bringing in a model that you use successfully somewhere else. It isn't about choosing your favorite application or your favorite way of doing something and bringing it fresh and new into the business. It is just really about what's the true business need, examining that, and then fixing it in the most efficient and the most valuable way. And I always put value over cost. The most valuable way for the CEO and the chief operating officer, so they can see benefit, but they can also see a reduction in operating costs.
Nice. Thank you for that, Rob. That's been so helpful. Just a little recap then. Some of the things that I heard is that an egoless way of operating will be something that certainly goes down well with Rob. A way of viewing what you do through a commercial lens. So you look at the impact on the business, good or bad, and articulate it in that way rather than just within IT. And look at communication, particularly around conflict resolution, about failure, about solving problems, and genuinely be a partner to the business, which I know is a cliche, but I think some of those things are practical examples of what that means, will stand you in good stead. And get ready to work for someone like Rob, because he's not going to pat you on the back and say, well done. He's going to expect you to level up with him and to take that whole team on a journey that's going to put them in a position where they can start reporting into Rob's superiors, and Rob can gently back out and onto the next program. So that's an interesting environment to work in. Not many civilians will experience that, I'd say. I think that's perhaps more credit to your military background than you may understand it to be. So I want to say huge thank you for that. For those people who, so I got a question here. Does Rob work as a consultant or a permanent hire in a company? Rob, I think I heard you say that you tend to work on large programs, 18 months, 2 years long, and then when it's done, and you move on to the next thing. So that sounds like sort of medium to longer term interim work. Would that be fair?
Yes, yeah. At the minute, I'm in a permanent. It's deemed a permanent role, but it's coming to a natural end as I've driven forward the pillars of digital, product, data, and applications. So I'm not looking to move on to my next challenge. Okay. And that spins a little bit back to egos and job titles. I don't necessarily look for one that says CIO, CTO, interim CTO, CIO. They're all starting to blur, to be honest with you, in the technology world.
If you want to connect with Rob, his LinkedIn URL is on the screen now, linkedin.com/in/Rob Clifford -MBE. And if you liked what you heard there, if you thought that was helpful, then just do a quick one-line post on LinkedIn. Just saw #ExecEdgeShow with @JohnnyWalker and @Rob Clifford, and then add your comments, please. And you get the benefit of us commenting on your post with a replay link, and a whole load of our network being alerted about that, and that will help you out too. And also it's the right thing to do to pay it forward to other people. But in the meantime, I just want to say a huge thank you to Rob Clifford. Rob, I really appreciate it. No,
thanks for the opportunity to talk, Johnny, and thanks for everybody for listening.
All right, and next week, Thursday, 12:30, more of me and a special guest at 1. See you then. Look after yourselves. Take care.